Kyle Van Noy joined Colin Cowherd on his show, and both of them raved about Lamar Jackson, the Baltimore Ravens, and got real on John Harbaugh. We talk about that and so much more coming up next on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire, here with you on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for being here today on this midweek edition of the show and making Locked On Ravens a part of your day and your first listen each and every day. Free and available for you on all podcasting platforms, including in video form on YouTube, where you can like and subscribe to the channel, and as an audio form where you can follow along and subscribe wherever you get your favorite podcasts. 5 days a week plus more daily Ravens coverage. So Monday through Friday, we have you covered every single weekday, and then we sometimes do bonus episodes on the weekend. We go live after every single Ravens game and piece of big news. So if you want daily Ravens coverage, keep it locked in here on Locked On Ravens. Today's episode of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Free agency starting to slow down a little bit, and this is around the time it does. There are still plenty of quality names out there on the market, but first couple of days, it's always the most hectic, and then gradually it slows down. Sometimes it'll pick up. The Ravens had a busy weekend, but we really haven't heard much from them since then, so who knows? Now that I said that, maybe a move happens today or tomorrow. But we have some more stuff to talk about. Kyle Van Noy joined Colin Cowherd on his show, and both of them just went, on. They raved about Lamar Jackson, the Ravens, and John Harbaugh, everything. So I want to talk about what Van Noy had to say. Colin Cowherd had some comments as well, and I thought they were really interesting. So we'll take the first couple of segments to talk about that. First segment will mainly be on Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry, and then second segment will move into more John Harbaugh and the Ravens organization. And then we'll dive into how the Ravens actually want to approach the rest of free agency, what I think they should do, especially with the draft being their friend in this scenario, how they can play free agency and the draft off of each other as they usually do. So let's start off here talking about Colin Cowherd and Kyle Van Noy. So, of course, on the herd, Colin Cowherd does a great job and has been one of Lamar's biggest media defenders after, and people sometimes don't remember this, Colin wasn't sold on Lamar Jackson, but he's admitted he was wrong and has gone to bat for Lamar really ever since that. Now, Colin started off by asking Kyle about just, him being motivated, and Kyle talked about how he didn't have any offers and that motivated him when he came into Baltimore and this, that, and the other. But then Colin asked about Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson and kind of Derrick coming in and how that whole process worked out. And Kyle Van Noy said, quote, "In camp, you knew it was going to be a work in progress. It was the first time I believed both played with superstars and they elevated each other because they knew they didn't have to do everything. But at the same time, when it was their time, they took it upon themselves to go to another level. The leadership that Derrick Henry brings, the attitude that he brings, it is exceptional. It exudes through the entire building. Everybody likes to be around those two." So it feels like Derrick, when he came in the building, especially according to what Kyle Van Noy said, who, by the way, is a respected NFL veteran. He is a respected voice in that Ravens locker room. And Kyle Van Noy, his words do carry weight. Because Kyle Van Noy keeps it real. And he kept it real with Colin Cowherd on his show. He keeps it real all the time. I think Kyle also does a really good job of really making his points and helping people understand where he's coming from and what he's trying to say. And I think in this situation, it's something that we've talked about here on the show. A lot of other people have talked about it too. During the whole MVP conversation with Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen, it felt like Lamar was getting punished for having Derrick Henry on his team, right? It felt like, oh, Derrick Henry makes Lamar better. Like, oh, Lamar's doing this because of Derrick Henry, which, again, we don't have to go down that rabbit hole. We talked about it all throughout the season. But what Kyle is essentially saying here is, like Lamar, him playing with a guy in that backfield like Derrick Henry, Lamar has not had a talent like that back there, a superstar talent in Derrick Henry. Meanwhile, Derrick Henry in Tennessee really didn't have that superstar quarterback that he played with. So now you combine superstar quarterback, superstar running back, and yes, like sometimes Lamar picked up the load for Derrick. Sometimes Derrick picked up the load for Lamar. But when it was the case, you didn't have to feel like if you're Lamar, oh, I have to go do everything. Or for Derrick, oh, I have to go do everything. And I think that benefited both of them, which Kyle is saying here. And I'm really glad that he made that point because, yes, Lamar did make Derrick better. Yes, Derrick did make Lamar better. That was the natural course of action. He mentioned the Kansas City game in week 1 where the Ravens kind of got away from Derrick a little bit in that one, and they ended up losing because Isaiah Likely didn't get his toe in bounds, which was unfortunate. But as Kyle said, it kind of went up from there. Like it evolved from that point, and as the season went on, we saw the Derrick Henry usage that everybody hoped to have seen. And yes, John Harbaugh said, yeah, Derrick's not going to get 30 carries a game. We didn't bring him in here to do that, which I know that comment, we talked about it here, that got a lot of flack at the time, but it did make sense what he was saying. What people didn't want to happen was Derrick be a 12, 13 carry per game running back when you paid him a decent amount of money for a running back at that time. I know the market has gone up since then. And obviously I think running backs with Saquon Barkley, Derrick Henry, et cetera, have proven their worth. And to be honest, they shouldn't have had to do that. I think that the market was ridiculous in the first place, but it's good to see that, yes, it worked out as anticipated. I think, I didn't have any doubts it was going to work out. I know that Kansas City game was like, okay, let's test things out. But again, glad it worked out for him. But the thing, and we'll move on to Lamar Jackson here, he ended up talking about Lamar because, again, at the end of that quote about Derrick Henry and Lamar and that pairing together, he said, everybody likes being around those two. He then said, Lamar Jackson is the best teammate. He hangs out with everybody. He knows everybody's name. He's a joy to be in the locker room with. We know Lamar is a great locker room guy. We know Lamar is a very respectful guy. We know that Lamar carries himself off the field in a very respectful manner and seems to get along with all his teammates, right? Seems like he has relationships with a lot of the guys. Seems like he truly cares about a lot of the guys. And that's what you want from a leader. Everybody does it differently, right? Lamar isn't a rah-rah type of guy, and that's fine. But I think that when Lamar goes out of his way to do these things, when he goes out of his way to have relationships with these guys. And again, like Lamar, I think is a very personable guy. I know that he's kind of on the quieter side and keeps to himself. And again, that is totally okay. But you're kind of getting a peek behind the curtain here from Kyle Van Noy being like, yeah, all the stuff you hear about Lamar and all this stuff about, oh, he's a great teammate, great leader. Yes, here's an example of that, of him taking the time to get to know all these guys and have relationships with all these guys. And Kyle even went as far as to almost thank Colin Cowherd on behalf of Lamar. He said, quote, we know you talk very highly of him, and I'm sure he appreciates that. You're one of his big cheerleaders in the media, even though he's had his downs in the playoffs. And then he went on to say, I think that's a part of his journey. I also think it's going to propel him. The Lamar Jackson I know that I see every day is going to fuel him and get him better and better. We've seen just a little bit. I think he's got a whole other level to go to. And I agree with Kyle here. I get it. Lamar in the playoffs, he's gotten the bad rep. He's had bad games. Now, I think that the reputation he has in the playoffs is a little bit overblown just because, look, in certain moments in the postseason, he has faltered. And I'm not going to shy away from that. I don't think anybody should. He has not been up to the standard that the Ravens have needed him to be. But I think the narrative of Ravens lose in playoffs because of Lamar Jackson is unfair because it's not all Lamar's fault. Sure, he plays a part in it, but I think that it does motivate him. I think it does motivate the team. But again, I think the big point that a lot of people have made, especially after the Buffalo loss, is, okay, well, Ravens' 10th revenge season begins now, and how much motivation do they need? And, what's going to finally get them over the hump? We know the Ravens are a good regular season team. We know if Lamar stays healthy, they're probably going to make the playoffs. But what happens once they make the playoffs, that is the biggest question. But I do agree that it does motivate it. It will propel him, in my opinion. Lamar is still 28 years old. There's a lot of time for him to win a Super Bowl. Other Hall of Fame type quarterbacks, obviously, I think people draw the comparison to Peyton Manning, but other Hall of Fame quarterbacks, they've had to wait a while to win their first Super Bowl. So I'm not worried about it. I believe Lamar will win at least one Super Bowl. By the time it's all said and done, I believe he'll bring one back for the city of Baltimore. Speaking of that, Colin Cowherd ended up going off of Kyle Van Noy's point and saying there are a lot of quarterbacks in this league. There's not a single quarterback that defines the city and the team like Lamar. I love Mahomes, but that's as much as Andy Reid as anybody. I honestly feel if I were to pick a culture in a city for Lamar Jackson to play in, it would be always overlooked, often disrespected, tough, gritty Baltimore. It was a great fit from the start. And we knew that when Lamar Jackson was drafted, the team that was going to take him on, that was going to bring him into their franchise, they had to be all in. It's the same thing with guys like Josh Allen, right? Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson both would not have succeeded in different organizations because Buffalo and Baltimore, they knew that this was their guy and they would change the system for that player. Baltimore changed the system for Lamar Jackson. Buffalo did the same thing with Josh Allen. That is why these two guys have evolved into two of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. And I love the fact that they have evolved into that. I love the fact the organizations believed in them so much. And those organizations got rewarded. It wasn't that Baltimore tried to change Lamar Jackson to be what they wanted. It was, hey, we want Lamar Jackson. We want this skill set. How can we build our team around Lamar Jackson and that skill set? Not how can we make Lamar Jackson fit what we currently have? Because if they did that, it would not have worked. But Baltimore's a city that, doesn't get the same rep as, bigger markets. And Baltimore's not a big market team. And they're a team that always flies under the radar. And, Lamar was disrespected during his college days, during his pre-draft process, teams are asking, can you go play wide receiver? Baltimore wanted him as a quarterback. Baltimore wanted him to be their future franchise leader. And that is exactly what they got. And I think that it's awesome that Colin kind of makes that connection between the city, which, again, Lamar Jackson has grown to love. Lamar Jackson is a part of this Baltimore community. And that's what makes it even better here is that, Lamar has ties to Florida, to Louisville, to Baltimore. Like, he is a big part of all the communities that he goes to, all the communities that he ends up stopping in. And I think that's a really big part of Lamar Jackson. And, we can talk about his on-field play all we want to. He's amazing. But off of the field, it is absolutely incredible the person that he is and the leader that he is and how he ingrains himself in the communities. Like, all of that also is part of Lamar Jackson's story. And the fact that Colin made that connection, I really like that. So coming up in the second part of the show, we'll finish out what Kyle and Colin had to say about Lamar Jackson. Then we'll move into the John Harbaugh comments and the Ravens organizational comments as well. Stay tuned. A lot to get to here on Locked On Ravens. First, this show is brought to you by Gametime. Imagine watching your favorite team live, feeling the energy of the crowd, and witnessing unforgettable moments. There's nothing like experiencing a big game in person. Getting tickets shouldn't be stressful. That's where Gametime comes in, making it easier than ever to grab last-minute seats at unbeatable prices. Now, Gametime Picks, they have curation that makes it easier to find better value for tickets to sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and so much more. Plus, they have super deals, the lowest price guarantee, or Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. And with seat views before you buy, no surprise fees, and a lowest price guarantee, you can book with total confidence. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. That's LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guarantee. Back here on Locked On Ravens, Kevin Oestreicher still here with you, talking Ravens football. Ravens in the midst of their offseason, the draft coming up quickly. Free agency is in full swing right now. The Ravens obviously making additions, subtractions, figuring out what their roster is going to look like for the 2025 season. We're talking about Kyle Van Noy and Colin Cowherd and their comments on the herd yesterday about Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry. And now we're going to move just into finishing up Lamar Jackson and that part of it, but then John Harbaugh as well, which I think people will find interesting. Now, with Lamar Jackson, Kyle Van Noy, he played with Tom Brady. Tom Brady got Kyle Van Noy a couple Super Bowl rings, which Kyle Van Noy is very thankful for when talking to Colin on his show. But he ended up comparing a little bit of Tom Brady to Lamar Jackson and Lamar Jackson to Tom Brady, which, again, skill set wise, some similarities, but we know Lamar Jackson is an athlete and Tom Brady, not so much when it comes to that aspect of his game. But I think a cool thing that Kyle said is for Lamar, he said, quote, he does Madden plays. Tom, he's the pocket passer, rhythm passer, does everything great mentally and all that. Lamar can just show up and play, and that's different. Nobody can do that. Only he can do that. And Kyle was not saying that Lamar is not a pocket passer and Lamar is not a rhythm guy and he's not great. he was just complimenting Tom there. Lamar can do all of that as well. That's not the angle Kyle Van Noy is trying to take there. But again, it's their greatness is measured differently here because both players are great. Tom Brady goes down as one of the best quarterbacks in NFL history. And if Lamar Jackson continues on his trajectory and wins a Super Bowl or two, he will be on that same path as Tom Brady. And we'll have debates of him in top 10, top 5 conversations if he can get there by the time his career is over. But Lamar has been very vocal about the fact that Tom Brady was one of the guys that he idolized and still idolizes, and that's his guy. Tom has a ton of respect for Lamar. And the fact that Kyle has been able to be around both those guys and play with both those guys and still draw comparisons, I think is an awesome thing where, again, it is different. Tom and Lamar are different players, and Tom did things better than Lamar did. Lamar does things better than Tom did. That's just a natural flow here. But I think that for Lamar and his progression over the course of his career, to see him, and every quarterback, every player comes into the NFL raw and with things to work on. Some guys are more pro ready than others, but we saw Lamar sit behind Joe Flacco for half a year in 2018. And I think through that process, and then coming in, starting, leading the Ravens back to the division title that year, and then taking off for his MVP season in his second year, and just, trajectory skyrockets from there. We've seen the progression of Lamar Jackson. We've seen the evolution of Lamar Jackson. We saw it this year. This was the best Lamar Jackson we've ever seen. And for Tom Brady, we saw that from him as well. And yes, Tom was able to win Super Bowls early in his career, and, he had different success than Lamar has had. It's just everything is different. But the fact that both those guys are being mentioned in the same breath as Kyle Van Noy here, it's a really cool thing because we know how much of an idol Tom Brady has been to Lamar Jackson over the course of his entire life. Now, moving on to more of the John Harbaugh Ravens organization-centric comments, which, again, provide kind of insight into how Van Noy as a player and players in general view the Ravens organization. Colin Cowherd asked about John Harbaugh and the fact that, okay, he's been around for a while, this, that, and the other. And Kyle Van Noy, before he gave his answer about Harbaugh, first of all, talked about Steve Rashod. He said, Mr. Rashod, amazing owner, one of the best I've been around. Top down, loves football, wants the team to win, but he pours money into the organization. He gives everyone that A1 treatment. It doesn't matter who you are. We know this about the Ravens organization. We understand, and this is what not everybody, most players have said about the organization. Of course, it's not going to be a 100% hit rate there, but it's an organization that is very player friendly. It is an organization that if you're a veteran, you want to try to win, plus be in a good culture, good locker room. It's a good place to be. And for Kyle Van Noy, again, who didn't have a lot of offers, had to sign with Baltimore a couple of years ago, early in the year, he's come in and he's had nothing but good things to say about the organization that gave him a chance. But it's not just about, oh, they gave me a chance, I'm going to speak well about them. It's about, oh, wow, this is how things are actually run here. And Kyle Van Noy has played in a bunch of different places. He played in Detroit, played in Miami, played in New England, like we talked about. He's been around the block. He's played in a bunch of places. But I think the fact that he speaks so highly of the ownership, of the organization, is nothing necessarily new, but it's still really cool to hear, in my opinion. But with John Harbaugh, he said, I just believe what separates him is his relationships to players. He truly cares about what you think and how you see things, and he literally goes up to anybody and will ask, and he takes tidbits from anybody and he puts it into his program. He doesn't just focus on his way or the highway. He adjusts. That's why he's lasted so long. If you stay the same for so long, you're not going to improve. You're not going to get better. That's where I see the difference with him, is that mentally, to get better each and every year, and the trust that he has with his players. He's a relationship guy. He's a tough guy. He likes to get after it in the weight room himself every single day at 5 o'clock. That's the kind of attitude. And he has that standard for everybody, that standard of excellence. So these are glowing words from Kyle Van Noy on John Harbaugh. I know that there's a lot of controversy throughout the fan base about John Harbaugh, if he's the right guy to lead the Ravens to another Super Bowl after he did it back in 2012, 2013. So that's over a decade ago. But the one thing, whether you don't like John Harbaugh or you do like John Harbaugh, he is a player's coach, and he has transformed himself into a player's coach, because he was not that early in his career. He had the big arguments with Ed Reed, Ray Lewis. He tried to challenge the leaders in that locker room early on, tried to establish authority. And over the course of his coaching tenure with the Ravens, that has spanned now almost 2 decades, he has transformed himself into a guy that players want to go to battle for. Players want to play for John Harbaugh. We heard DeAndre Hopkins talk the other day about, okay, well, what were some of the deciding factors in you coming here? And DeAndre said, man, Coach Harbaugh. That was his first thing that he said in that answer. He talked about Lamar a lot, talked about everything else a lot, but he made a point to mention, hey, Coach Harbaugh, that's a reason why I'm here right now. So yes, John Harbaugh has his faults. I'm not coming on here and saying he doesn't. We've all talked about it on here. We all understand that he has his faults. But again, whether you don't like him or you do like him, he is and he has transformed himself into a guy that players do want to play for. Does he sometimes make clock mistakes? Absolutely he does. So does sometimes he make bad game decisions? Yeah, we've talked about it before. We have multiple examples. But sometimes with these coaches, and again, it's kind of like the old school type of coach with kind of a new school mentality where like Mike Tomlin is a big players coach, guys like Harbaugh, you have even others as well that have stuck around in the league that players just love to play for, right? Now, the new wave of coaches, young offensive minds, young defensive minds, the Harbaughs, the Tomlins, there aren't a lot of those anymore. Pete Carroll's back in the league. You got Jim over there in Los Angeles now. But I thought it was interesting the fact that, Kyle talks about, hey, it's not his way or the highway, which I think is a thing that a lot of people talk about with John Harbaugh. It's like he doesn't adjust. Kyle Van Noy is saying the opposite here. So it's an interesting dynamic because Harbaugh is somebody that does have influence. Harbaugh is somebody that, is very passionate about his players. He'll stick up for his guys, obviously. But the John Harbaugh last couple of years, at least when it comes to playoff success, that is what you are measured on when you're a win now franchise. And the Ravens are in that era right now. And his performances haven't gotten the job done. His teams have not gotten the job done. So I still think that 2025 is a make or break year for John Harbaugh. There's been no announcement of an extension. This is the last year of his deal. So I think that if it doesn't go the way for John Harbaugh that the Ravens need it to, which is probably at least the AFC Championship game, if not Super Bowl appearance / Super Bowl championship, we could see a change there. And with that, I don't know what it brings, but that's a whole separate conversation. Now, coming up in the final part of the show, we're going to finish out our Kyle Van Noy comments that he had to talk with Colin Cowherd about. We'll dive into what he had to say about the Ravens and Steelers rivalry because he had some interesting comments on that. Plus, we'll dive into how the Ravens should approach the rest of free agency with 1 week down. Stay tuned. We got a lot coming your way on Locked On Ravens.
The NCAA tournament is here, and so is the bracket breakdown.
Locked On Podcast Network and Amazon Fire TV channels are teaming up to deliver NCAA tournament coverage like never before. Watch studio shows featuring former players and Locked On's local experts as they guide you through every upset, buzzer beater, and bracket matchup.
Stream it all for free on Amazon Fire TV channel. Search Bracket Breakdown to see it all for free.
It's your team every day.
Back here on Locked On Ravens, Kevin Oestreicher here with you on this Wednesday edition of the show. Appreciate everybody again for being here today and making us your first listen of the day on Locked On Ravens and a part of your day in general. Be sure, again, hit that like and subscribe button in video form and audio form for 5 days a week of daily Ravens coverage plus more. If you're a first-time listener and every day or somewhere in the middle, thank you for your support. And be sure to tell a friend and tell a family member as well. If they want some daily Ravens coverage, want the Ravens perspective on things, be sure to send them over here our way on Locked On Ravens. Now, let's finish up the Kyle Van Noy comments. Ravens and Steelers rivalry, obviously was the big thing for so many years, but recently feels like it's kind of lost some of that juice, and Kyle Van Noy honestly agreed with that, but he said, quote, the disdain is getting back with that Pittsburgh Ravens rivalry. I feel like it wasn't there when I first got to the Ravens. It's been mostly the Cincinnati Bengals and us, but I feel like it's going back to that Ravens-Steelers rivalry that we've been so accustomed to. And he talked about it's not really even the players that are trash talking, it's the coaches, like on the sideline that he said, the mic'd ups don't pick up and it's kind of going on behind the scenes where the cameras aren't getting it. Like, apparently it's some of the coaches on the sideline that are talking trash that are getting this rivalry fired back up. And look, we've seen Patrick Queen go over. Now, Malik Harrison is over there as well. Arthur Millette came over from Pittsburgh, Baltimore, Alejandro Villanueva. I'm sorry for mentioning the name, but Alejandro Villanueva came over from Pittsburgh as well. I know that tender did not go very well, but still the point stands where guys are now flip-flopping. And even, talk about Bengals, Stone going from Baltimore to Cincinnati, and that kind of juiced up the rivalry a little bit too over there. But I agree where we're starting to see that rivalry come back a little bit more. Again, it's not the Ray Lewis, Ed Reed, Troy Polamalu, Ben, Joe Flacco days. Like, it's not that. But I still think that based off of, that couple year stretch that we saw before this year, it kind of was like, oh, the games are close, sloppy football. But we've seen these last two games, the Ravens have put it to the Steelers, and hopefully it stays that way. But, Colin talked about this, where it's like, yeah, those games usually are close, and it's that smash mouth football, which absolutely is true. Those are physical games. And if you can get some of that rivalry juice back, I think that's what not only the Ravens and Steelers need, but that's what the NFL needs, if we're being honest there. Kyle Van Noy also talked about toughness guys on the team. He said the two big toughness guys for them are Travis Jones and Nnamdi Madubuike. Those were his two picks there. Ravens defensive line room, and this kind of segues into our free agency approach kind of part of the segment. Ravens defensive line room is looking not weak, but they certainly need to make some additions there. Michael Pierce retiring is a very big loss for them. Brent Urban is a free agent. Broderick Washington really hasn't done a ton since signing that contract extension. Nnamdi Madubuike, great contract year last year, or at least 2 years ago, I guess, at this point. And last season was double teamed a lot. The production kind of dropped for him a tad, but you still saw a guy that was impactful even beyond the box score. Travis Jones is somebody that's eligible for an extension, will be a free agent after next year. And he's someone that we know is a great run defender. He can push the pocket. But I think that the Ravens, and this again, will now talk about how they should approach free agency moving forward. Yeah, I think you got to bring in another defensive lineman or two. This is a very deep defensive line class. You have multiple different options that you can bring in, whether you want to take a day one tackle, day two tackle, or even a day three defensive tackle. Like, you have the ability, depending on how the board falls to you, with Ronnie Stanley coming back, you don't have to pigeonhole yourself into an offensive lineman early if you don't want to. Secondary might be that position you might look at. Safety is a big one. I know a lot of people are talking about like a Malachi Starks or Nicky Manwari, one of those guys. The corner market, though, is there's not a lot left, if we're being honest there. Jair Alexander is the big fish, but he's the trade guy, and the Packers might not even move him. So other than that, your free agents, it's older guys because a lot of the other ones have signed. So I don't know what that looks like if the Ravens do decide, and I think they probably take a corner on day two, very minimum first pick of day three. Maybe they even get a guy on day one. But I think at this point, Baltimore should probably sign maybe one more depth piece at offensive line, but I think most of that will now come through the draft with Ronnie and Ben Cleveland re-signed. McCary is gone, but again, I think you can work with that with a rookie. But it's going to be big. Secondary and edge, I think the Ravens missed out, if being honest, on Azeez Ojulari. I was very disappointed, especially with the deal that he got, that Baltimore couldn't make that happen. I feel like for the player that he was earlier in the season last year, and then having, the injury kind of brought his value down, but that was a guy we talked about a ton here on Locked On Ravens. I would have thought that would be a great fit for them. There are still a couple other guys they can sign there, but I think they have to sign one veteran edge and then probably take one in the draft. Defensive tackle, like we talked about, I'd probably sign one vet and then draft one. Safety, I'd probably draft one. Corner, trade/draft. You probably need one more inside linebacker at this point. Probably going to draft a wide receiver. I think you're good on tight end with Mark and his roster bonus being picked up. You have Cooper Rush now, so you don't need to draft a backup quarterback anymore. Running back, you have four guys already. I don't even think all four make the roster. So really got to focus in on defense, I think, if you're Baltimore here. Pass rusher and secondary, that's where you have to go. And again, while free agency will slow down a little bit here, maybe the Ravens make a move in the next couple of weeks, maybe they don't. But this is a months-long process for Baltimore where they want to drag this out, see if markets come down. Obviously, they're going to have to probably create some cap space as well. They're going to have to fit a lot of things under the cap. So we'll see if extensions, restructures come down the pipeline here. But Baltimore is in a decent spot. I think they're in a decent spot. They have 11 draft picks. I would assume that they're going to move up and down the draft board a little bit. I would hope so, honestly. I think 11 is too many draft picks. especially for a Ravens team that, yes, it's important to hit on your rookies, your second day guys, third day guys, as much as your first day guys. But still, that's a big thing as well. So that's all I have for you here today on Locked On Ravens. Thank you so much for tuning in to the show. On the way out, be sure you hit the like and subscribe button in video form and follow along and subscribe in audio form for that 5 days a week of daily Ravens coverage. Coming up tomorrow, we'll be back talking more Ravens football. So be sure to stay tuned. I'll see you right back here tomorrow on Locked On Ravens.